Hi, everyone. I'm just going to wait a minute or two for people to come into the webinar. Okay, why don't I get started? Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our presentation today about Berkeley Law's Loan Repayment Assistance Program and attending our series about financing a legal education this week. My name is Amanda Pursoon, and I'm the Director of Public Interest Financial Support at the law school. Here on the call with us today, we also have our LRAP and Financial Aid Advisor, Rosanna Hill-Thomas, who will be answering any questions you have. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A at any time. There'll also be time at the end if you have anything to ask. All right, before I start today with my presentation, I do want to acknowledge the land that we're on. We recognize that Berkeley sits on the territory of Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the historic and sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. As members of the Berkeley community, it is vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also we recognize that the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the Berkeley and broader Bay Area communities today. All right, today I'm going to be talking about loan repayment generally, Berkeley Law's Loan Repayment Assistance Program specifically. I'll go into a little bit about federal public service loan forgiveness, give you some things to think about and action items, and then we'll have time for questions. So if you're thinking about that you will have to borrow loans for law school, you are definitely not alone. Most students are going to be borrowing loans for law school, and for a lot of people, it is going to be their first time borrowing loans. What you need to know is you don't actually have to start paying your loans until after you graduate. But once you do graduate, you'll have some choices to make, like, are you going to pay off the loans or seek loan forgiveness? What repayment plan do you want to be in? And do you want to utilize things like a loan repayment assistance program? There's going to be these three fundamental programs for people who are public interest graduates. I wanted to lay them all out here at the beginning before I go into more in depth about each. But the first is called income-driven repayment. It's a federal program for anyone with federal student loans, and it's run by the Department of Ed. And what it does is determine your monthly payment amount. And it's really available to anyone who has federal student loans, regardless of whether you do something like a loan repayment assistance program or federal public service loan forgiveness. Now, loan repayment assistance programs like Berkeley Law's are institutionally run. They're not connected to the federal government or your loan servicer. And what they do is they help you provide funding to make your monthly payments. Usually your eligibility is going to depend on the type of employment you have and what your income is. But generally, it's going to be available whether you do something like public service loan forgiveness or not. And then lastly, federal public service loan forgiveness is also run by the Department of Education. It's a way to get your loans forgiven after 10 years of qualifying payments and qualifying employment. The good thing about it is it's available to anyone with federal student loans, whether you do LRAP or not, or whether you're even in legal employment. Okay, let's talk about what you decide to do with your loans. You really have these choice between these two main loan strategies. You can either pay off the loans that you borrow in full, which would mean paying off the entire amount of the loan plus the interest that accrues during and after law school. That means typically you're going to have a higher out-of-pocket cost if you're going this way. Your monthly payments will depend on your loan debt and how long you take to repay the loan. So generally, it's easier to do this loan strategy if you have a higher income or a lower loan debt. Oftentimes, someone who's going into big law or into other private employment would pursue this strategy. Now, alternatively, you can get your loans forgiven. So instead of paying the entire loan balance off, you will, after a period of repayment, get your remaining loan balance forgiven. So that does result in lower out-of-pocket costs over the life of the loan. And if this is the strategy you're going for, you're probably going to have a lower monthly payment amount that's smaller and more manageable. So it is better for someone with a lower loan debt or a higher loan debt or lower incomes, or someone working in public interest or public service employment. Now, depending on what plan or what strategy you want to choose, you will decide what type of repayment plan you want to do. The federal government has many different repayment plans that you can choose from, but the two main ones are, first, the standard 10-year repayment plan, where if you pay your loans in this amount for 10 years, your loans will be totally paid in full. So it's based on your loan debt. Now, if you want your loan payments to be smaller, you would do an income-driven repayment plan where your monthly payment will be reduced and be based on your income. And actually, your monthly payment will change from year to year, or even more often if you want it to, because it's based on your current income at that time. Now, instead of actually resulting in your loans being paid off in 10 years, the end results are going to vary. Depending on your loan debt and your income and your interest rates, your loans might increase, decrease, or stay the same over time if you're paying under an income-driven repayment plan. So putting these all together, the payment plan and the payment strategy, wrapping this up, the standard plan and loan repayments, it's going to result in your loans being paid off entirely, which is great. There's really no complicated paperwork. You're kind of just setting up auto pay and letting your loans run down to zero. But the cons are that your payments could be quite unaffordable, even in the thousands of dollars a month range, and you are going to be paying more over time. Now, if you do income-driven repayment and pair that with loan forgiveness, your payments are affordable, you'll be paying lower out-of-pocket costs over the life of the loan, and you can utilize things like Berkeley Law's LRAP. But the cons are there's going to be more paperwork involved. You have to reapply for things like income-driven repayment and LRAP and keep records for public service loan forgiveness. And like I mentioned, your loans might actually grow in size over time. So if you want to do income-driven repayment, you probably want to pair that with the loan forgiveness option. This is my last general loan repayment slide, but I wanted to kind of show you what would this actually look like in practice. So if you borrow about $100,000 in student loan debt, if you wanted to pay off those loans under the standard 10-year plan, you'd pay around $1,100 a month. If you wanted to do income-based repayment instead, and you had a $60K income, you'd pay around $340 a month. And if your income was $80K, you'd pay around $500 a month. So you can see how that really reduces your monthly payment amount. Now, if you were to borrow $200,000 in student loan debt, your standard plan would increase because your loan debt is increased. You pay around $2,200 a month. But with the income-driven plans, you're paying the same amount even though your loan debt is higher. So you can sort of see the interaction between loan debt, repayment plan, and income here. All right, let me start talking about Berkeley Law's LRAP. If you have any general questions about loan repayment, feel free to put those in the chat, but I'll begin talking about our program. It's a program that's designed to support Berkeley Law grads in public interest employment. It's available to any JD grad who has eligible loans and employment. What it does is we help make your monthly income-driven monthly payments. Basically, you apply for LRAP each year. We give you a lump sum forgivable loan that should cover the monthly payments for the following 12 months. You have to enter within 3.5 years of graduation, but once you do, you can use up to 120 months of LRAP support, and that is cumulatively, so you can leave and enter the program at will as you wish. And then you have a total of 15 years after your graduation date to use those 120 months whenever and however you'd like. For LRAP, you're going to need to have certain types of loans. Only federal direct student loans are eligible for LRAP support. This includes things like Graduate Plus loans, Stafford loans, direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans, if you've been seeing these terms around. Private loans aren't eligible for LRAP, so that's something to consider when you're figuring out what types of loans you're going to borrow for law school. The great thing about our LRAP is there's no maximum amount of loan debt that is covered. That means that if you have these types of loans from undergrad or maybe a master's program, those are going to be included. All you really need to do is enroll those loans into an income-driven repayment plan. The employment that is eligible for our LRAP is law-related public interest employment. Generally, that for most people means you're going to be working at a nonprofit or in government. Clerkships do qualify. Some other types of jobs are also eligible for LRAP, like a private public interest law firm or a plaintiff side firm, unions, an international NGO, but those jobs are not going to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So if that's something you're considering, you will have to work out a loan repayment strategy that's going to work with your employment choice and your loans. Okay, so for LRAP, there's some numbers to be aware of. If you're making $80,000 a year or less, you will get 100% LRAP support. If you're making over 80K, you're going to receive a prorated amount of support that kind of reduces as you increase in income. And how it works is you contribute 35% of your income over 80K to your own loans out of pocket, and LRAP covers the difference between that and what your loan payment amount is. And for LRAP, there is a 100K income cap. I see that there's a question that's mildly related to this, like, is there an income cap to use an income-driven federal repayment plan? No, there's not. There is a debt to income ratio that the Department of Ed considers when determining if you're eligible for income-driven repayment. Generally, the only people who aren't eligible for income-driven repayment are people with high incomes and really low loan debt. But if that were to happen to you, your monthly payment would probably be pretty low anyway, and we could still work you into LRAP as someone who isn't eligible for IDR. Okay, here's some examples of kind of how LRAP support works out in practice. So if you had a $400 monthly payment and a 70K income, you would pay nothing out of pocket because you're making less than 80K, and you would get $400 a month from LRAP. If you had that same monthly payment amount and you had a 90K income, you are above the 80K threshold, and your out-of-pocket contribution would be around $290 a month. That means that to make up for that $400 monthly payment, LRAP would give you $110 a month in support. Same salaries, but if you had a $600 monthly payment, again, the 70K salary, you'd have no out-of-pocket contribution, you'd get $600 a month from us. And with the 90K income, you have the same out-of-pocket contribution because it's based on your income, which means you get more LRAP support from us because your monthly payment is higher. All right. Here are some places that current LRAP participants are employed. People are employed all over the US and even some international employers. About 50 people from each graduating class end up participating in LRAP at some point, and around 300 people participate in LRAP at any one time. So it is a pretty highly used program. I give you this information and these places of work only to let you know that LRAP is definitely here for you. It is a feasible option to make public interest employment workable for you. So we're definitely here to help you and make public interest employment a reality. Okay, let me talk about public service loan forgiveness because our program is sort of related to it, and so are a lot of other LRAP programs. This is a program that was created by Congress back in 2007. It's a 10-year forgiveness program that requires 120 qualifying payments made while working in public service employment. Now, the payments can be cumulative, just like LRAP, so you're free to go in and out of qualifying employment. And then after 120 qualifying payments, you apply to get your loans forgiven with the Department of Education. The main 4 PSLF requirements are that you need to have qualifying loans, and only direct federal student loans qualify, just like LRAP. They need to be in a qualifying repayment plan. So all of the income-driven repayment plans qualify, and so does the standard plan. You have to make 120 payments on those loans monthly, And then you have to be in qualifying employment while you're making those payments. And to PSLF, qualifying employment means full-time employment with a 501c3 nonprofit or in government. PSLF, if you were to look in the news, looks very bad. The acceptance rates are pretty low and there are so many horror stories out there, but I do want to reassure you that PSLF does work. It is a real program. We have seen Berkeley Law grads and LRAP participants receive total loan forgiveness through this program, but it's not the easiest program to navigate, and it is going to require 10 plus years of public service employment and your dedication to that. You have to be willing and able to follow the PSLF requirements and keep up to date with those as they evolve and change. You need to do frequent check-ins on your loans, make sure you're doing everything right. And you really have to have these strong record keeping skills, because you want to be able to tell if an error has been made and potentially initiate a dispute with your loan servicer or the Department of Ed if something goes wrong. All right, the latest updates are that over 16,000 people have had their loans forgiven through PSLF and a related program called Temporary Expanded PSLF so far. As of April 2021, which is the last time the Department of Ed updated their data, over 583 million in student loan debt has been discharged by these two programs. Now, the Department of Ed tells us that 82% of applicants don't have direct loans that have been in repayment for 10 years. And 14% of applicants don't have 10 years of qualifying employment. So those are the reasons the vast majority of people have been denied from getting PSLF. I want to provide some context for why those PSLF success rates are so low and why the program seems so scary to people. We are about 4 years into anyone being able to have 10 years of qualifying payments and employment since the program started back in 2007. As you saw on the last slide, most people don't have enough payments when they apply for PSLF. And I think the reason people are applying for PSLF when they're actually not eligible is because of how bad the program is administered by the Department of Ed and the loan servicers. I mean, historically, they've provided pretty bad guidance about which type of loans and repayment plans qualified. They didn't really reach out to people to let them know that they didn't have qualifying loans. And there's just like these weird errors happening, like for the first 3 years of the program, most people didn't even have qualifying direct loans. So a lot of people had not qualifying loans and didn't realize that until they had made 10 years of payments on them. Or how for the first 5 years of the program, the Department of Ed did not create a form to track your employment. So nobody, people had problems tracking their payments and employment from the early years of the program. The program is definitely confusing. There are little things that can trip you up, and the Department of Ed and the servicers don't make it easy to realize if you're doing things right or wrong. But there is room to be hopeful. The Department of Ed knows it made a lot of errors, so it's fixing these by, you might have seen a few weeks ago, they are creating this new waiver to allow prior ineligible payments to count for PSLF, even for people who were in the wrong repayment plan or had the wrong types of loans. That's the same thing with this temporary expanded PSLF program. Borrowers who are in the wrong repayment plan can get their loans forgiven because they weren't made aware of that it was the wrong repayment plan. There's also a ton of improvements to come. The Department of Ed recently announced they want to simplify PSLF. They want to make it automated. They want to do a whole audit of previously denied applications and fix those errors and just be more proactive with their communications. And if you follow the news, there's also this negotiated rulemaking process that's happening at the Department of Ed, where a committee is getting together to brainstorm how to improve PSLF and income-driven repayment and propose new regulations. That's happening right now. So by the time that you graduate law school, you may experience a much better and more proactively administered PSLF program. I want to reassure everyone, because I get this question a lot, PSLF isn't going anywhere, certainly not over the next year while you're applying to law school. Any proposed changes to the program have included like a grandfathering provision for anyone who has borrowed loans. So once you become a borrower, you sign a master promissory note, you become an existing borrower, and that master promissory note mentions PSLF. And to throw this out there, there's widespread support for PSLF across a lot of professions. Public service is a very broad definition. And of course, there's a lot of growing support for mass student loan reform and forgiveness anyway. Really, what you should worry about is making sure you're meeting those requirements and that you're taking the time to learn about the program. If you do that, and if you care and you can keep records, then you can be successful with PSLF. I see a question. Rosanna, I don't know if you're answering that, but I will get to that at the end if you don't. All right, let's go to some action items. I'm sure Berkeley Law is not the only school that you are looking at. If you're thinking about attending a school with a loan repayment assistance program, they are all vastly different. I have looked at dozens of them. They're very hard to compare. So when you're thinking about a school's LRAP, there's a lot of things you might want to be thinking about. You'll want to look at what type of employment qualifies for an LRAP, and does that fit within what your plans are? What type of loans are eligible? Is it federal direct loans? Does a school maybe include private loans too? You want to look at how long the program can last. And some schools actually have requirements that you participate in the program for a certain length of time. So you'll want to see if there's a period where you actually have to be in the program after graduation for a length of time. You'll want to look at how long the deadline is to enter the program. Look at that salary cap and what the out-of-pocket support formula is. Every LRAP has their own thresholds and income limits that you'll want to look at. You want to see if there's a maximum amount of loan debt that's covered under the program, and if the program makes you be in any particular repayment plan. And then if you're married, if you have dependents, if you do something like family or medical leave, how is that going to affect LRAP for the programs you're considering? I think for Berkeley Law's LRAP in particular, I've answered most of this today if you are wondering, but I will say that if you're married and your spouse makes more than you, we average your incomes. If your spouse makes less than you, we don't look at their income at all. If you have dependents, we take it off a dependent deduction, so we're reducing your salary, and you can receive LRAP during any period of family or medical leave. Okay, here's some things to think about as you're preparing to enter law school. Definitely research the gift aid, cost of attendance, and LRAPs for any schools you're considering. If you're wanting to be considered for any like named or self-selected scholarships, make sure to submit those supplemental materials. Definitely complete a FAFSA so that you can be eligible to borrow federal student loans, and make sure to pay attention to any additional merit or need-based gift aid applications once you've been admitted. Now, I'm really bad at making a budget, so I'm not going to go and tell you to make this extravagant budget, but make a plan for your first year of law school. So you'll look at your gift aid offer, the cost of attendance, figure out how much loan debt you'll need to incur based on those two numbers, and think about, are you going to go to Big Law and pay off these loans? Are you thinking about LRAP and PSLF? That might change your calculus about how much you end up borrowing or how you end up paying for law school. And then certainly if you're interested in LRAP and PSLF, you'll want to borrow those loans that are eligible for these two programs. All right, when you're in law school, something to think about is that you can return excess loans, or you can borrow more loans during each semester. I always recommend borrowing as little as possible to increase your career and financial flexibility, but of course, you need loans to live comfortably while you're attending school. At Berkeley Law, and I'm sure at many other schools, there's things like continuing student scholarships that you can apply for over the summer. There's outside agency scholarships. Apply for those if you're eligible to further reduce your loan debt. And make sure to reevaluate your budget and student loan needs each year. Some years you might need less. Definitely during 3L, when you have the bar exam at the end of the year, you might need to borrow more. When you're in your job search, post-grad job search, but this can even apply during summer employment. If you're going to use your summer employment as a post-grad job opportunity, look for jobs that qualify for LRAP and PSLF. And definitely come speak to an LRAP advisor while you're in school so we can help you plan. And then once you've graduated, you'll want to enter that qualifying employment for these programs that you want to participate in. You choose and apply for a repayment plan. You enter LRAP. You start making these monthly payments 6 months after you graduate. You'll want to keep documentation. You'll want to reapply each year for all these programs like income-driven repayment and LRAP and PSLF. And then after 10 years, you apply for PSLF, or if you've gone the other route, you'll be paying off your loans. Okay, that is all that I have for today's session. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll answer this one that is here. If you have further questions, you can email us at lrap@law.berkeley.edu. If you go on our website, you can make an LRAP appointment or check out our materials there. Okay, so if you have a domestic partner, essentially, if you can file taxes jointly, then we will ask you to report both of your incomes, even if you file separately. All right, does anyone else have any questions?
Amanda, there is one more question.
Sure.
It's in the answered, but it's from Anna Maria asking, does the family total income count, or would it be just the student's income? And I believe it was directed toward LRAP, but maybe income driven as well.
Oh, okay. So if you're thinking about LRAP income, it's essentially your income and then your spouse or domestic partner, whoever you can file taxes with, you would report both of those numbers. If your spouse or domestic partner makes more than you, we're going to average your two incomes to figure out where you fall on that scale of like 100K, 80K, those threshold numbers. If your spouse makes less than you, we're just going to use your number. If you're thinking about how this would impact like income-driven repayment, it is like a total family, total spouse calculus. Because the Department of Ed uses a tax return to figure out what your monthly payment should be. So if you file taxes jointly, or if you have dependents or some other situation, your entire family income would be included in that determination. All right, I don't see any other questions right now. Thank you all for attending this session. Please reach out if you have questions, especially as the cycle continues and you figure out maybe how much loan you're going to have to borrow and whether you want to participate in LRAP. But that's all we have today. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.